Hi, in this video we're going to learn how to use Google Spreadsheets, how to use the functions in Google Spreadsheets to manipulate math functions and formulas, and how to create relational cells. So let's get started. The first thing you need to do is log in to Google and click on this button up here. Click on Drive. And then click on the New button up here and create a new Google Sheet. So that should start you out with a clean spreadsheet. A lot of the stuff we're going to learn here can also be applied in Microsoft Excel. It's just that we all know we have Google Spreadsheets available to us, and so let's use them in something that we all can use. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit so we can see a little clearer. Alright, so you'll notice in this blank spreadsheet it's split up into columns A, B, C, D, and rows 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These columns and rows go on pretty far, not an infinite number of rows and columns, but a pretty large amount. And so the basic building blocks of a spreadsheet are these cells. So what we're going to start off with is numbering these cells 1 through 20, starting in cell A1. So click on cell A1 and type a 1 in. You can follow along with this or just watch the video and try this afterwards. Once you click a formula, you press enter, or once you type in a number or a formula and press enter, it appears there in the cell. The next one we're going to enter is a 2, and then a 3, and on down. Now we don't have to type in all 20 numbers. You can imagine if it was more than 20, maybe 100 or 10,000 numbers, it would take too long. So you can simply grab the first 2 numbers, and you'll see a little box. When I say grab, you want to highlight the 2 numbers. And you'll see a box that appears in the lower right hand corner. Just grab that box, hold down your mouse cursor, and drag it down to number 20. And it will appear the order which you would expect. In column B, let's do the same thing, except we're going to go from 2, 4, 6, 8, all the way up, counting by 2s, up to 40. So I'm going to type in a 2 and a 4. And again, we don't need to type them all in. We simply highlight the first 2 and drag this down. So it'll notice the difference between the first 2 numbers, and it will apply that difference throughout. Now, say for instance we wanted to double the numbers 2, 4, 8, 16. We can see that this number is being doubled every time, so the next cell should be 32. But Excel doesn't recognize this. If we were to drag this down, it doesn't find the same sequence you would expect. So it expects a linear sequence, and so typically what it does is looks at the gap between the first 2 numbers, and that's what it's going to use for your difference if you're highlighting 2 numbers. So we'll stick with that. So let's try one more. 5, 10. We'll count by 5s now. And what I want to show you here is if you grab the 2 cells we just typed in, you can double click this square and it will automatically drag down to the point that has data in the column next to it, and it will stop at that point. So that's very useful to double click on that box. Now, this is all data we entered manually. Sometimes we want these cells to be related to each other. So in cell D1, I'm going to add up these numbers. So instead of typing 1 plus 2 plus 5, which you can do that, what you want to do instead is make them related. You want cell D1 to be related to cell A1, B1, and C1. So the first thing you have to do to make the cells relational is type an equal sign. And then you actually click on the cell that you want it to consider for, adding. And then we add cell B1 and add cell C1. And then you press enter, and you can see that it's an 8. What's nice about this is, if we type a different number in here, say a 2, and press enter, cell D1 was automatically updated. So that's the beauty of using a spreadsheet program like this. Any of your input data that changes will automatically be recalculated, and you won't have to go and figure that all out again. Let me change this back to a 1. Now, another beautiful thing about this program is if we were to drag the information in this cell down by clicking on that bottom square, it automatically selects the next row of cells down. And you can see in the formula right up here what it did. Since you dragged the formula down, it automatically assumed you wanted to take the numbers in the row right below it. Sometimes you want this, sometimes you don't. Most of the time you do, so that's the default. And again, you can just double click or drag this down, and it will automatically fill in all of the rest of the formulas. And as I click through each of these boxes, you'll notice up here in the formulas box that each formula is being shown. If I click on the formulas box, you'll notice it's color coded, and each color represents the box that's part of the formula. Okay. Now we added these A, B, and C cells together, but there's a function that can do this, and it's called the sum function. So in this row, in this cell E1, we're going to type equals sum, and we're going to sum up A, B, and C. And so we're going to type in the word sum and use open parenthesis, highlight all 3 of them, and then close parenthesis. So you can see it looks like a function in the sense that the sum, the thing on the outside of the parentheses, is the function, and the stuff inside the parentheses is your input, or your argument, they call it. And you can see if we had maybe 10 or 20 or 100 cells we wanted to add up, it's a lot faster to highlight them than to type them all in one at a time. So you should get the same answer in this cell as you did in this cell, because this one is essentially the same thing. We can also multiply, divide, and subtract, and all sorts of other functions in this program. So let's do one more. Let's multiply all of the cells now. So equal, and we're going to multiply this cell times this cell times this cell. Press enter, and when you multiply these you get 10. Well, once again, there's a formula for this, because what if we wanted to multiply all of the cells, and there's a bunch of them? So instead we're going to use the product formula. So equals product, and anytime you type a word in that's a function, you have to do open parenthesis, highlight the data that you want to be multiplied, and close parenthesis. And again, you can double click this. Again, this works for dividing and subtraction as well. Let's do exponents. Suppose you want to do a math function 3 squared. Well, 3 raised to the second power, there's no way in here to do that mathematically without using this symbol called the caret symbol. So what we see here is 3 raised to the second power, which is 3 times 3. And so if we press enter, you would expect it to say 9. But it did not show 9 because we need to put an equal sign right in front of that 3. So it knows to calculate. So there you go. If we were to drag this down, it still says 9 because we just clicked on one cell and dragged it down, and it didn't know how to increment the sequence because there was no other cell to compare it to. Now if we wanted to do 3 squared raised to the 5th power, you can see how big this gets. And sometimes you may want to use parentheses to distinguish what your order of operations are. There's also square root functions. The square root function is equal to SQRT. And anytime you have a function, you always have to have an open parenthesis. Click on the cell that you want to find the square root of, and then close parenthesis. So this finds the square root of 640. Now, if you wanted to, if you double click to bring the function back up, you don't have to type in a relational cell. You can simply type the number in if you'd like, 640. But if the cell ever changes, say this changes to 600, your formula won't update because it's using a fixed number rather than a cell as its input. All right, let's go over some other basic functions that you can use. The average function. The average function, let's say we want to average all of the numbers in column A. So let's go to the bottom of column A and type in equals average. And again, open parenthesis, highlight the cells that you want to average, close parenthesis, and press enter. So the average of all of these numbers is 10.5. You'll notice when I highlight all these, it puts a semicolon in, a colon in here. If you say you only wanted a few of these, you can put commas in between these numbers. Say we want to average cell A1 and A20. You separate them with a comma, and it turns out that's the same average. Let's say I wanted to add cell A2. You can just type it in as well. You don't need to click on the cell. Press enter, and now I've averaged A1, A2, and A20. Again, if you click on the function at the top, it'll highlight the cells that you have in the formula. Pressing escape helps a lot of times when you're trying to get out of a cell that you've entered. Let's look at another function. There's a minimum and maximum function. If we type in equals min, open parenthesis, that will find the minimum of a set of numbers. So I'm going to highlight all the numbers in column B, and you'll say the minimum is 2, and that's because that's the minimum number. Now if I changed one of these numbers to say a 1, that's less. So now notice this cell changed, and a lot of the cells along here changed as well because they were all related back to that cell. If I press undo, Control Z undoes the function, or so does this button right here. Undo and redo. You can see how the cells that are related to cell B13 constantly get updated. Like I mentioned, there's also a maximum function, equals max, open parenthesis, and let's just highlight a few cells. And we could highlight the entire table if we wanted to. Let's highlight the entire table, close parenthesis, enter. So the maximum number in this entire table, again the table was A1 through F20, that's a 20 row by 6 column array of numbers. Looks for, in every cell at for the largest number, and that's the value right there. So again, if we were to say change that to a 1, the next largest number will pop into that cell. A few other functions. Round. Let's suppose we wanted to round a number like 7.6666. So we type in equals round, open parenthesis. You click on the cell that you want to round, you type in a comma, and then you say what place value you want to round to. If we round to the third place value, it gives you a preview of what it will do. So 3 means the third decimal. If we put a 0 in here, it'll round to just the very, 0 decimal places, so just the integer. So if we want to round to the first decimal place, the second decimal place, once you're done, you close parenthesis, press enter, and it just rounded that number. Least common multiple is another function. You might use this when you're trying to find prime values or prime lowest common denominators, those sorts of things, or when you're factoring. So LCM, least common multiple, and you could type in, say, what is the least common multiple of, let's say, 6 and 10. The least common multiple, it always gives you a preview of the answer, is 30. That's the least common multiple. Well, what about the greatest common factor? That's another one we use. Equals GCF, greatest common factor of 6 and 10. So the greatest common factor of 6 and 10 is no name, unknown function. Greatest common, let me try this. Hold on one sec. Oh, in Excel it's the greatest common factor. Here in Google Spreadsheets it's greatest common denominator, GCD. The greatest common denominator is 2. Let me show you how to use some of this in a like a review of algebra assignment. Let's come up here and I'm going to go find an empty cell, and let's suppose I have the function x squared minus 3x plus 5. If I plug the value into x, let's say I plug the number 2 into x, you would get 2 squared, which is 4, 4 minus 6 plus 5. And so we could type a 2 in here if we wanted to, a 2 for where x is. We must put a multiply sign in between these or it won't recognize it as multiplying. And the multiplication symbol is right above the 8. It looks like an asterisk. And again, if I press enter, it won't calculate. You have to put an equal sign in here. Okay, so 3. But again, we don't want to type in the number 2. We want to type in, let's say, cell B1. So instead of a 2, I want it to be automatically updated based off of the input I give it in a different cell, like B1. So B1 squared minus 3 times B1 plus 5. And so every time I would have had an x value, I'm going to click on the cell that would have been my x value. And now I can change this to anything I want, and it should be updated. You can make graphs this way, one at a time. Again, we could have dragged this down and saw that for any one of these b value inputs, we'll get these outputs for this function. A couple more examples and we'll be done. Let's suppose we want to convert Celsius and Fahrenheit temperatures. There is a convert function, equals convert, and you can convert between many things. You can try that out on your own. But the formula to convert from Fahrenheit to Celsius is 5 times the Fahrenheit temperature minus 32, close parenthesis, divided by 5. This is the division symbol. That slash is a division. And again, if I press enter, it doesn't know what to do because I gave it the letter F. So let's remove the letter F and just put in any one of these values we want. Any cell you want is your input. We're going to convert 8 degrees Fahrenheit into Celsius. It turns out negative 24 is the temperature in Celsius if it's 8 degrees in Fahrenheit. So here are your values. So it looks like and I just realized I messed up the function. This is a good learning moment here. The function should have been divided by 9, and I put a 5. So I press enter, and notice all of these did not get updated. In that case, you'll have to still drag it down, and it will update the function. That makes more sense now. If this is my temperature, 72 degrees Fahrenheit, which is room temperature, that's equal to 22 degrees Celsius. One last thing to learn here is scientific notation. I'm going to click on a new sheet by using this plus button that says add sheet. And in cell A1, I want to multiply the number 7.2 times 10 raised to the negative 17th power. Again, if I pressed enter, since I don't have an equal sign here, it just keeps what you've typed in. A couple problems with this. One is I need an equal sign. Another is I can't use an X for time multiplying. I need to use the asterisk. And we press enter, and it says 0. And the reason it says 0 is because this number is so small, we don't have enough digits of precision to show it. So if I double click on it, I can replace all this stuff right here, times 10 raised to the negative 17th power, with a capital E. And that E represents times 10 raised to the. When I press enter, oops, I guess I need some parentheses around this. And I just realized we can't have a space after the 7.2. So 7.2 E rate to the negative 17th power, enter. Again, it says 0. Let's put a more practical number in here so it won't say that. Let's make it a 2. 7.2 E negative 2 is the same thing as moving that decimal where it was here between the 7 and the 2, move it over 2 spots to the left. So if we want to say multiply 7.2 E negative 2 times 5.9 E3, that's the same thing as saying 7.2 times 10 raised to the negative 2 power times 5.9 times 10 cubed. That's what we're doing here. So this automatically recognizes that. And I realize I need to put a multiplication sign between these two parentheses, otherwise I wouldn't know to multiply them. Press enter, and there's our number. So here are just a few of the ways you can use Google Spreadsheets or Excel to do a lot of math problems that you're used to seeing. And feel free to use this on your homework and use it as a tool. Thank you for listening.